Chapter 35. Why did you bid on such a useless item? Garjith asked with a confused expression. It was just an unknown piece of metal that had gone unsold for such a long time. As someone unfamiliar with magic, Garjith couldn't seem to detect any value from this metal object. It was small, about the size of a finger at most, and it couldn't be reforged or even manipulated with mana. Although the starting price might have been the lowest of all the items that the auction house had unveiled so far, in Garjith's opinion, that metal object wasn't even worth 1,000,000 sals. Eugene didn't say anything. Instead, he clenched his fists as he tried to bring an order to the dizzying flood of thoughts rushing through his head. Vermouth had wielded numerous weapons in his life, and among them, there were quite a few powerful relics capable of turning the world on its head. The storm sword WYD that Eugene currently possessed, for one. And then there was the devouring sword Asphal, the dragon spear Carbos, Thunderbolt Pernoa, Phantom Rain sword Javel, Geddon's shield, etc. The most famous of his weapons was the Holy Sword. Although it hadn't seen much use these days, it was seen as the weapon that best represented Vermouth. Apart from those, there was also the Demon Spear Luentos previously used by the Demon King of Cruelty and the Annihilation Hammer Jigalath that had once belonged to the Demon King of Carnage. While not to the same extent as the Holy Sword, all of these weapons had left their marks on history, but strangely enough, there was no record of the Moonlight Sword. From what Eugene could recall, it was the Moonlight Sword that had allowed them to break through in the face of Luentos's fierce assault and finally defeat the Demon King of Cruelty. However, in the fairy tales and other historical records, the Holy Sword received the credit for the downfall of the Demon King of Cruelty. The Demon King of Cruelty wasn't the only victim of the Moonlight Sword. 300 years ago, there had been many powerful enemies in Helmuth besides the Demon Kings. They were the high-ranking demon folk who fell just short of becoming a demon king. Enemies like the Vampire Lord and the Tribal Chief of the Giants. And it wasn't the brilliant light of the Holy Sword that had allowed them to clash with these powerful enemies and paved the way forward. Instead, it was a terrifying beam of moonlight that had forcibly torn open a path forward with the power of destruction. And that seems to be a fragment of the Moonlight Sword, Eugene thought. This meant that the sword might no longer be intact. However, he wasn't sure what could have caused the blade to shatter into fragments. He also couldn't be sure that his eyes weren't fooling him. No matter how clear the memories from his previous life were, he couldn't come to any definite conclusions based on a single glimpse of such a small fragment. After a while, someone knocked on the door. As the item he had bid on wasn't that large, it had been brought to him right after he won the bid. Eugene immediately got up and opened the door. I was right, Eugene decided as he stared down at the fragment that had just been delivered. The unique dim shade of the metal was just as he remembered. This was definitely a fragment of the Moonlight Sword. But how on earth did a fragment of the Moonlight Sword end up in this auction house? The Khazard Hills. The place where this fragment had been found was further proof of its true identity. The location of the Khazard Hills was a little ways away from the castle of the Demon King of Carnage. It had originally been a plain, but in the aftermath of the fierce battle that took place at the Demon King's castle, the whole place had undergone a massive upheaval to become a hilly area. It occurred right after they had defeated the Demon King of Carnage, just as they were leaving that Demon King's castle. They had discovered a dungeon that had been hidden deep underground. Suspecting that the demon folk may have hidden it deliberately, they had explored the dungeon and found the Moonlight Sword at its very heart. The only possibility that I can think of is that, as Vermouth was leaving Helmuth, he took the Moonlight Sword back to its original resting place and sealed it there. Then why had the Moonlight Sword shattered into fragments? But if Vermouth really had decided to reseal the Moonlight Sword, Eugene suspected that he knew the reason why the sword had ended up as fragments. The Moonlight Sword was simply far too dangerous. Although the Demon Spear and the Annihilation Hammer were also deadly, the Moonlight Sword exceeded them both. That ominous sword had acknowledged Vermouth alone as its master, and it had always caused terrible destruction whenever it was drawn from its sheath. Vermouth couldn't have felt reassured with just sealing such a horrible and dangerous sword. It's too quiet, Eugene observed. The fragment of the Moonlight Sword was perfectly still. It didn't give off any sense of danger. Well, if it had shown off even a trace of the terrible power that it had held 300 years ago, it wouldn't have been left on auction for so long without any bidders. With a bitter feeling, Eugene placed the fragment of the Moonlight Sword back into the wooden box. It was now just a fragment that held none of its previous power. He would be lying if he said that he hadn't held any expectations for it. He had hoped that a trace of its power might still remain. But even if it was just an ordinary piece of metal now, he didn't feel too disappointed. Just having such a worrisome object remain safely in his hands put his mind at ease. Sir Eugene, the communication terminal buzzed. Sir Ewan has arrived. It was the guide's voice. Eugene slipped the wooden box into his vest and stood up. I'm leaving now, he told Garjith. Don't you want to keep watching? Garjith asked him. I don't. I'll leave my card with you before I go, so tell them that I'll pay for your bid afterward. It was impossible to charge a black card without the owner present to provide authentication. But since the black card was so famous, it should be acceptable for them to allow Eugene to pay for the bid after a slight delay. And if they said it wasn't acceptable? Eugene couldn't really care about it. Instead, it would actually be a good thing for him, as that meant he wouldn't need to pay the large sums of money required to purchase those balls. After summoning one of the staff members with a press of the left button, Eugene was led outside the auction house. A lot of time seemed to have passed while they were inside, as the air now had that late-night chill. However, the street was still brightly lit. It appeared that the street lights here didn't go out until dawn. Where do I need to go? Eugene asked. If you head up to the north end of the street, you will be able to find a store called Rafflesia. That's where you need to go, the guide explained. Eugene began walking. By the way, just what on earth are you planning to do? This type of shop strictly ensures the security of its customers, so... Eugene didn't answer right away. He had just decided to head over there first without having a clear idea of what he would do. He just needed to, he wanted to, first of all, look Ewan in the eye. How would the eldest son of the main family react when confronted with the fact that someone knew of his ugly little secret? Would Ewan be angered by his exposed shame? Or instead of getting angry, would he just stay silent? Would he spout excuses? Eugene wasn't sure what to expect. To be honest, he just wanted to grab Ewan by the collar and slap both of his cheeks to teach him a lesson. But since he's so pitiful, I'll give him a chance. If Eugene didn't get to slap Ewan's cheeks red, he at least wanted to know what the hell Ewan was thinking. As he headed north, the atmosphere of the stores he passed began to change. By the time he reached his destination, the lights that were previously only used to illuminate the darkness had turned a sultry red, and the appearance of the greeters had also changed dramatically. Handsome men were attempting to seduce the passing women, and beautiful women were throwing smiles at the men. So there's incubi, succubi, as well as vampires working here. I can even see a few beast folk. So it wasn't just demon folk working here. There were quite a few beast folk who looked like a cross between humans and animals and plain humans as well. Without sparing these greeters a single glance, Eugene looked up at the name of the store. The sign read, Rafflesia. That meant he had finally found the store after walking down the street for quite some time. The exterior of the store looked fancier than he expected. Without any hesitation, Eugene approached the store entrance. As he drew closer, he was met with a challenge. Are you here for our services? 5 burly men hanging around the front of the store stepped forward to block his way as if they had been waiting to do so. Eugene stared at the young man standing in the center of their group. He had pale skin, red eyes, pointy ears, and tiny horns. Demon folk came in various different types. The night demons were just one category of demon folk, and starting from 300 years ago, the giants had also been counted as one of the tribes of the demon folk. Corrupted dark elves and vampires were also mixed in with their number. So the term demon folk didn't refer to a single race but instead referred to all the races ruled by the demon kings. But among all these races, the horned race, also known as the demons, made up the greatest percentage of the population. In fact, the demons could even be called the orthodox race of the demon folk. 300 years ago, all 5 of the existing demon kings had been demons. I do want to head inside, Eugene said as he looked straight at the young demon. Since his reincarnation, this was his first time encountering a group of demon folk, and with a demon among them at that. If he was still in his previous life, the demon would already have been dead before their eyes had even met, but Eugene didn't reveal a single trace of his murderous intent. The demon asked, "Is this your first time visiting our store?" "What, am I not allowed if it's my first time here?" Eugene asked. "Of course not. As long as you pay the entrance fee, you're free to head on in for as long as you like." "How much is this fee?" "The base entrance fee is 2 million sals. After that, Any further cost is calculated according to the contents and length of your requested dream. Would you still like to enter? The demon asked with a faint smile. Without replying, Eugene pulled out his wallet and handed the demon 2 checks. Upon receiving the entrance fee, the demon immediately stepped away from the door with the parting words, "Please enjoy your time here." Ignoring his words, Eugene walked into the store. He was immediately greeted with red lights and the sight of a raucous bar. The entire first floor appeared to be used as a pub. He could also spot various succubi and incubi wearing suggestive clothing as they went around delivering trays of alcohol and playing coy with the guests. Eugene paused for a moment as he took in this scene. "Allow me to lead you to a seat," a beautiful succubus offered as she approached him and entwined her arms around his. Ignoring her, Eugene panned his gaze upwards. It seemed that both the second and third floors were also used for drinking. He couldn't spot any rooms that looked like they could be used by the customers here to enjoy the dreams. They must be in the basement, Eugene concluded. He could see a few succubi and incubi leading customers down into the basement. So where was Euad now? Was he having a drink somewhere, or was he already caught in his dreams? But before anything else, he needed to deal with this smell. The perfume scent coming from the succubus sticking to his side was overpowering. "Is this where we get our dreams?" Eugene asked. "It seems like you're in a rush?" Now that he had shown weakness by bringing up this topic first, the succubus eased up on her advances as she looked at Eugene with amused eyes. "What a cute guest. Is this your first time visiting our store? Why don't we get some drinks first?" The succubus's smile widened as she casually brushed her body against Eugene's arm and whispered, "If you drink something beforehand, it relaxes your body and allows you to fall into a deeper state of sleep." "If there's no bed, I can't fall asleep," Eugene insisted. "Don't worry about that. As long as you drink in moderation, I'll be sure to lead you down to the basement before it's time to sleep. But more importantly, what kind of dream would you like us to arrange for you?" The succubus lowered her voice as she led Eugene to an empty seat with a sense of familiarity. "Don't be shy and tell me everything. We need you to be precise and specific with your desires if you want to enjoy your best dream experience." From these words, Eugene was able to estimate the levels of the succubi who worked in this store. High-level night demons were able to cause their victims to fall asleep regardless of their wishes and create a dream for them based on their subconscious desires. Considering that these ones needed to ply their guests with alcohol to make them sleepy and had even asked him to detail his intended dream's contents, there were only low-level night demons here. "I don't feel comfortable saying anything yet," Eugene said after some thought. "Then it looks like you'll need to have a drink first," the succubus smiled brightly. "Don't worry, our drinks are both delicious and strong. After you've had a few glasses, you'll be sure to speak your desires without feeling any shame." Having just sat down with him, the succubus got up again and left. Before long, the succubus returned holding 2 glasses of wine. "Is it okay if this big sis drinks with you?" the succubus asked. "Who said that you could call yourself my big sis?" Eugene thought as he took the glass. This would be his first time trying alcohol in his new body, but was he a good drinker as well? His talented body rarely suffered from minor illnesses and was strong against fatigue, so there was no reason why it should be weak to alcohol. With that thought in mind, Eugene brought the glass to his lips. They've even gone so far as to spike this drink, Eugene soon realized. A sweet scent had been subtly mixed in with the smell of the alcohol. It was the scent of a hallucinogenic herb that only grew in Helmuth. Since the levels of these succubi were insufficient, it seemed that they were even making use of such a hallucinogen to make up for their lack of power. Well, it makes sense. There's no way that a high-ranking succubus would come to a street like this just to peddle dreams. As the smell was faint, the drug didn't seem too potent. Eugene took a sip of the drink with an urge to test his body's tolerance. His throat burned as the alcohol went down. For the first drink he had had since his reincarnation, it tasted pretty good. However, due to the location in which he was consuming the drink, the aftertaste was just foul. "It looks like you're a good drinker," the succubus hummed thoughtfully. Having taken a sip, Eugene put the drink down. Then he focused on observing the reactions taking place in his body. The heat of the alcohol warmed his stomach and then sent a rush of sensation up to his head, causing him to feel a little woozy. "Looks like I have quite the innate tolerance." He decided to risk drinking the rest of his glass. As he did so, Eugene scanned the inside of the store. There are people going down, but none are coming back up. Eugene lowered his empty glass. Let's head down, Eugene demanded. The succubus hummed in confusion. The drinks here don't match my tastes. Are you feeling embarrassed to say anything up here? You don't need to worry about that, but in that case, shall we head down to the bedrooms now? The succubus asked, concealing her disappointment. She had intended to persuade him to drink a few more glasses so that she could make more off of him from the alcohol. However, it was impossible to ignore the demands of her customer. Eugene and the succubus got up and headed down to the basement together. It's a bit scary, Eugene confessed. What is? The succubus asked. It's actually my first time doing something like this, Eugene admitted. There's no need for concern. The succubus explained, although we do drain a bit of life force, it's only to the extent where you'll feel a little tired the next day. Why do you feel the need to charge us when you're already taking away our life force? If you're feeding on our life force, shouldn't you at least make it a free service? No. In exchange for the money, don't we offer you pleasant dreams? On second thought, I feel like I'm getting ripped off, so I don't think I can do this. If it's a dream, I can get one just by going to sleep myself, so why do I need to hand over both money and my life force? Instead of heading into one of the bedrooms, Eugene just checked out the length of the basement hallway. Then he shook off the succubus' arm and pulled out his wallet. I've decided to go back and sleep in my own bed, so I'll leave after paying the bill for the drinks, Eugene insisted. The succubus sneered. How does a cowardly guy like you have the guts to show his face at a place like this? Anything is possible. Since I'm scared and feeling reluctant, what else am I supposed to do? Taking out a check for 1,000,000 sals from his wallet, Eugene handed it to the succubus. Even though this amount confused the succubus, she still accepted the money. You don't need to give me any change, Eugene offered generously. Well fine then, the succubus replied, thrown off balance. Was this guy an idiot? Or maybe just a sucker? In any case, this wasn't a bad deal for the succubus. 1,000,000 sals were much more than the cost of those 2 cheap drinks. The succubus resumed her professional attitude. Goodbye then. Next time, please come to us after you've prepared yourself. I'll be sure to take care of you once more. My name is... There's no need for that. Where do I need to go to get out of here? Eugene demanded. Allow me to show you the way. They walked down to a room at the end of the hallway. The interior looked like it had been a storeroom, but there was a staircase heading upstairs. Eugene left the succubus behind and climbed up the stairs. He was greeted by a man's voice. Did you have a pleasant dream? The next floor was a restaurant. It looked like it was intended for their guests who had had a few drinks and then gotten their life force sucked in their dreams, to have a meal in the restaurant before they left. Eugene opened up the wallet he was still holding and handed the man who had greeted him some money. The man seemed surprised. You've already paid your bill? Eugene interrupted him. I want a quiet seat in a corner. The man hesitated. What's good here? Eugene asked brusquely. Although he was secretly put off by the young man's abrupt rudeness, the man politely accepted the money with a pleasant smile. The specialty of our restaurant is the magma stew. Its spicy taste has a real kick to it and it's packed with plenty of meat, the man gave his recommendation. Eugene's only response was, I want extra servings of meat. Yes, sir. This restaurant, whose name he didn't know, was just as noisy as the first floor of Rafflesia. Apart from the customers who had woken up from their dreams, the restaurant also accepted ordinary customers. Although this was a black market, that didn't mean that all the shops here sold illegal goods and services. Even in a place like this, there could still be restaurants. Eugene sat down in an out-of-the-way corner and pulled up his hood, but he wasn't the only customer doing something similar to protect their identity. Thanks to that, Eugene could quietly eat his food without attracting attention from anyone else. How long would he end up waiting? There had already been quite a few customers coming up from the basement, but Euid was nowhere to be seen. As the time passed, Eugene continued to order a few more dishes. The food here was quite palatable. There's the bastard. Just as he was done wiping his 4th plane clean, Eugene spotted his target. Euid was climbing up the stairs. He had his hood up, so it was impossible to see his face, but Eugene had a clear recollection of Euid's physique. On top of that, his hand could be seen below the cuff. That callous-free hand could be none other than Euid's. He didn't know how much Euid had drunk, but he was stumbling up the stairs. That alone would have been enough to piss Eugene off, but Euid wasn't alone in his climb. A few others were supporting Yuid as they followed him up from the basement, and they weren't succubi either. They were unmistakably demons with those horns on their heads, 2 men and 1 woman. A burning rage rose in Eugene's chest as he caught sight of them. He's not just playing around with night demons. He's even getting carried by demons. Eugene questioned in disbelief. As soon as Yuid reached the 2nd floor, 2 men who had been sitting in the restaurant got up from their seats. The 2 then casually paid their bills and made their way out of the restaurant, exchanging eye contact with the demons as they did so. They nodded their hooded heads to the demons, and Yuid and the demons followed them out. After confirming that they had all left, Eugene also got up. As quite some time had passed, the number of people walking the street had decreased. Eugene checked the direction Yuid and his unknown companions were heading in, then he turned and walked in the opposite direction. It was only after he had walked around the first building in sight that he turned around and started following Yuid. But where are they going? Eugene asked himself. After they had passed several blocks, still supporting Yuid on their shoulders, the group entered a particular building that didn't have any signage. After confirming that everyone had entered without leaving anyone outside, Eugene walked closer to the building. Right when he was about to push open the closed door, someone called out to him, "Hey kid. You're in the wrong neighborhood." 3 burly men walked out of the alley next to the building. While screwing up their ugly faces into a scowl, they glared at Eugene. "This isn't some kind of store, so get lost," one demanded. Eugene ignored the demand and asked, "Then what kind of place is this?" "Didn't I tell you to get lost?" he demanded again. Eugene put on a friendly tone. "Hey friend, don't you think that you're trying to cut our conversation a bit too short? I said get lost, you motherfucker. Why don't we go inside and have a talk instead of standing out here? This crazy bastard. Do you think that we have the time to joke with a brat like you?" One of the men stomped over and grabbed Eugene's collar. Despite the hold on his neck, Eugene admitted, "It does sound a bit like a joke." You're coming with me," the oaf demanded. The man could smell the scent of alcohol coming from Eugene. As he dragged Eugene into the alley, he spat out, "If you're drunk, you should just go home to sleep it off. Looks like I'll need to teach a brat like you that the world is a scary place." After giving him a moderate beating, they'd take Eugene's money as a teaching expense and then chase him away. The 3 men came up with this simple plan as they exchanged glances. Eugene was easily able to read their thoughts from their faces as he quietly followed them into the alley. One of the men began ordering Eugene, "First of all, take out your wallet." Since they had entered the alleyway, thus blocking the view of any watchers, there was no need for Eugene to keep playing along. Eugene pulled on the arm that was clutching his collar. This pulled the man's chin forward slightly, bringing it in reach for a swing of Eugene's fist. Before the man could even finish speaking, he had already lost consciousness. "You crazy bastard, what the hell do you think you're doing?" With a scream, the remaining 2 thugs rushed Eugene. "Come now, friends," Eugene chided the men. The 2 thugs soon fell to the floor, unable to even lift their fists. As Eugene kicked them idly with his foot, he continued speaking, "Now then, why don't you tell me what goes on in there?" "We don't know," the men stammered out. Eugene shrugged and said, "That's fine. It really doesn't matter if you can't tell me." Bam. Kicking the men in their chins, Eugene turned around and left. "Instead of listening to you, it should be faster and simpler to just take a look inside by myself." Chapter 36. Even at a second glance, Yuid's actions seemed suspicious. Accompanied by a group of suspicious people, he had headed into a building without any signage up front. That alone would have been suspicious enough, but a few burly and vicious thugs were even hanging around to intimidate anyone who got near. This was definitely a shady location. Eugene grabbed the doorknob and tried to turn it a few times, but the locked door refused to open. It looked like some kind of magic had been cast on top of the physical locking mechanism. Someone else might have asked themselves, "Should I smash it?" But Eugene didn't even pause to consider. The stars around his heart shone as Eugene checked the flow of mana that he could feel from the doorknob. Eugene felt lucky he had started learning magic. If it were in the past, he would have just tried to break through by force, but now he was even able to figure out the structure of the mana that formed this locking spell. However, just because this was true, it didn't mean that Eugene felt the need to change his method. It just meant that his usual fallback didn't require as much power as before. In the end, he was still going to forcefully break through the door. If Eugene's accomplishments in magic were higher, that might not have been the case, but at present, Eugene couldn't possibly unlock the spell cast on the door using his own magic. A visible shroud of mana covered Eugene's hand, and he then pushed this mana into the locking spell. Thanks to the fact that he was already aware of the structure that the locking spell had taken, it didn't take much effort to overpower the spell's weak point. Although it might seem obvious to say this, to dismantle a spell using this method, one needs to be able to control their mana as if it were their own hands and feet. Even a master wizard with quite some skill in magic would find this task impossible, but Eugene accomplished it with ease. Although the method might seem crude, the results were undeniable. The doorknob that was twisted open forcefully had completely shattered internally. After confirming that the locking spell had also been broken, Eugene lifted one foot. Bang! With a sharp kick, Eugene broke the lock off the door. While this caused the door to swing open and Eugene entered without any hesitation, he still kept his guard up. One of his hands was resting on the hilt of WE, which Eugene had hanging from his hip. Just by doing this, his vigilance jumped from merely adequate to almost excessive. As long as his hand was resting on his weapon, he could instantly draw it and have it ready for any situation. Eugene was assured by this. It was hard to see in front of him as the whole floor had been filled with a thick cloud of smoke. The very air felt sticky and clung to the back of his throat, the smoke having a sweet yet savory taste to it. It numbed his senses and caused his vision to go slightly dizzy. Eugene circulated the mana from the white flame formula throughout his body, and the mild dizziness went away immediately. So it's an opium den, Eugene muttered with a snort of disdain. Strange sounds were leaking out from the closed rooms around him. It made sense to find such a place on a street like this, but to think that Euid would immediately come here as soon as he was done with his succubus dream had Eugene's eyes turned cold. I can understand needing a place where he could catch his breath, but this is going way too far. How could anyone even breathe properly in a place like this? Just the dreams from a succubus alone were enough to weaken and ruin his mind, but if he was huffing drugs in an opium den on top of that, he was practically drilling holes in his own brain. While clearing the smoke out of his way, Eugene kept moving forward. Who are you? How did you get in here? Close the door. Men puffing on their drug pipes rose to confront him as he passed by their alcoves. There were humans, beast folk, and demon folk. This opium den was practically a forum for racial inclusivity. Eugene gave his heartfelt applause to the men who came staggering towards him. If guys like you were born 300 years ago, the world might have been able to hold our hands together in love and peace, Eugene praised sarcastically. One of the men shouted, "What the hell is this bastard talking about?" Eugene continued, "But don't think I'll let you off because of that, you rotten bastards." Eugene didn't draw WYD, nor did he run directly past them. Instead, the stars circling around his heart went into action. Bam bam bam. He instantly created a few magic missiles and sent them piercing through the smoke. Although they might be high on drugs, the addicts who had risen to confront the intruder were those who were quite confident in their own skills. Magic missile was just a first circle offensive spell. It wasn't that fast or that strong. So Eugene's targets dodged the spell with a snort of disdain. Or at least they tried to dodge it. Although they had immediately reacted to the projectiles with their attempts to evade, the chaotic trajectory of the missiles made it impossible for them to avoid the attacks. "They're way too obvious," Eugene observed with disdain. There was no way that Eugene would get fooled by the evasive movements of guys like these. Truthfully speaking, he was sure he could have hit them even if he cast the spell with his eyes shut. "Where is Euid? Gah. You don't need to tell me. I can just look for him myself." Muttering this, Eugene drew WE from its sheath with a chilling hiss. The silvery blue blade made its appearance. The men who had been sent flying felt their breaths being taken away by this sight. They knew they were going to die. Although Eugene didn't exude any obvious killing intent, their instincts sensed inevitable doom. They gave up any resistance and just curled up into balls, burying their heads in their arms. However, Eugene didn't swing his sword in their direction and instead raised the blade towards the ceiling. Whoosh! A fierce breeze engulfed WYD. It was the form of a lesser spirit of the wind, a sylph. But a sylph summoned by Eugene was actually able to create a gust so strong that it was impossible to believe that it was merely a low-ranking spirit. This was all because he was at the third star of the white flame formula. Although he was even able to summon intermediate spirits with his current amount of mana, Eugene wasn't inclined to do so. He had calculated that it was much better to increase the amount of low-man consumption sylphs he summoned, as he had much better control over them, than draining all his mana to summon an intermediate spirit. Eugene had far too much combat ability to put himself in a position where he needed to depend solely on a spirit's power for his own protection. Oh! The addicts still scattered on the floor around Eugene stared at him with fearful eyes. Eugene was now standing in the center of a fierce windstorm as he kept W80 in the air. The storm suddenly scattered. The gusts of wind it sent blowing in all directions scattered the smoke and smashed open all the walls and tightly locked doors on this floor. What the drug addicts found in all of the formerly closed rooms let out screams. Eugene swept his eyes over all of these rooms in a single pass. There were a lot of disturbing, lascivious and just plain disgusting sights, but Yuad wasn't one of them. There was no need for Eugene to continue searching for Yuad all by himself. He had scattered a number of sylphs along with the gusts of wind, and they were now blowing through the entire building. They soon told him where he needed to go. Even as he continued to bottle up his boiling irritation, Eugene headed upwards. Bong! A number of magic missiles were combined together to blow a hole through the ceiling. Then Eugene used the wind to lift his body up through the hole. Repeating this process, he arrived on the 3rd floor. Eugene landed in a hallway that was choked with both smoke and dust. With a buzzing sound, the sylphs that had followed him started to generate some wind. Using this to scatter the smoke, Eugene strode purposefully down the hallway. There was only one room at the end of this hallway, which meant Yuad had to be in that room. Even as he continued to stare straight ahead at the locked door to the room, Eugene's feet suddenly slid sideways. Hiss! A spine-chilling noise swept past as something brushed the side of his head. Without panicking, Eugene manipulated the wind around him. Boom! The wind gathered into one spot above him before exploding like a bomb. Falling from the ceiling, the man who had tried to attack him was forcefully embedded into the wall as his mouth sprayed out blood. It was one of the 2 men who had been waiting for Yuad in the restaurant. "If you're trying to backstab me, then you should at least aim properly, cheeky bastard." Eugene clicked his tongue at the man before reaching into his vest with his left hand. The ambush wasn't over just yet. Without even opening the door, someone inside the room attacked Eugene by casting a spell that burst through the door. With a snort, Eugene pulled out the item he had been reaching for. He then casually threw the luxurious wooden box that he had obtained from the auction house in the way of the attack. Contained within the box was the fragment of the moonlight sword that he had bought at the auction house. Wah! The spell was split into dozens of strands that swept across the surrounding walls. The fragment didn't break or show any other reaction to the spell's mana. What astounding performance, Eugene muttered as he grabbed the fragment that had fallen to the floor. Although none of the original sword's appearance had been retained, the moonlight sword's characteristics could still be seen from this small fragment. Eugene continued speaking while looking straight ahead. "If you had hit me with that attack just now, the power could have killed me." Behind the door that had been shredded by the attack, a man in a black robe was standing there. It was made even more obvious from his attire, but the spell he had cast had already revealed his identity as a black wizard. Panicked by the failure of his attack spell, the black wizard shrieked, "Who are you?" He had cast that spell with a resolve to kill, but it had somehow been blocked using some unknown method. Had this intruder used magic just now? But how had he never heard of a defensive spell with such an effect? "Why are you raising such an uproar here?" the black wizard also demanded. It was true that Eugene had been the one to start attacking unilaterally. After beating up the guards outside, he had barged in through the front door and smashed through the ceilings of the 1st and 2nd floors to reach the 3rd floor. So the wizard had reason to feel wronged. However, Eugene didn't care about that. He didn't feel the need to explain the situation or even reveal his name. Escaping from reality through a dream made by a succubus was pathetic but understandable. However, Yuad had crossed the line this time. Drugs were already a step too far, but he was even consorting with a fucking bastard who used black magic. Don't get involved with black magic. Gilead had even given Eugene a stern warning about such conduct before he left for Arath. But what did Gilead's real son think he was doing, palling around with someone who could even be called Vermouth's enemy? "Get out of the way," Eugene spat out an order as he put the fragment of the moonlight sword back inside his vest. "If you run away now, I won't have to try and catch you. I already thought you were a cheeky brat, but that's..." The black wizard snarled, Do you even realize where you are now and in whose presence you're behaving so rudely? Eugene coldly replied, I know exactly who I'm behaving so rudely to. That's you, Lionheart, isn't it? The thing that made Eugene feel even more furious and scornful was that, despite all the commotion, Yuid had yet to raise his head, let alone make a sound. Yuid was so high on alcohol and drugs that he was still buried in the sheets of his large bed, giggling to himself. It seems like your distinguished young master still doesn't even understand what's going on, Eugene observed sarcastically. The Black Wizard suddenly screamed, Kill him! The demon folk who had been sticking close to Yuid sprang into action. They were the ones supporting Yuid on the way here from the restaurant. The three demons directly threw themselves at Eugene. So they're all here, Eugene noted to himself. With these three, Eugene had finally met all the 5 people who had escorted Yuid to this opium den. One of them was still embedded in the wall outside, and the other had started trying to cast a spell right in front of him. Whoosh! The stars around his heart began to resonate as white flames flared up to cover Eugene's body. As he started to charge forward, wisps of flames scattered from him. Eugene lowered his body and drew WE back behind him. A lion with a white mane hides its claws, not needing to make the first move. It was only when the demons got into range that WNYD made its move. Whoosh! The lion's claws swung forward, tearing apart everything in its path. Arg! Blood spurted out from the chest of the demon who had rushed closest to Eugene. In the next moment, Eugene took a step forward. The wind wrapped around his sword exploded, and the body of the second demon who had been slowed by fear was thrown backward by the wind. Ugh! The demon who was right behind the second one was startled by this sight and tried to back away. However, it was much faster for Eugene to dive forward than for the demon to retreat. Although the demon lengthened its fingernails into blade-like claws and swiftly slashed at Eugene, the demon's arm was completely severed at the wrist before it could even complete its swing. The demon didn't even get a chance to scream in pain. Having already gotten into reach, Eugene's hand grabbed the demon by its face. Crack! With this grip, Eugene smashed the demon's head through the floor. This is insane, the Black Wizard muttered as his face turned pale. Although Eugene's skills were undeniably amazing, it was the white flames covering Eugene's body that truly shocked the Black Wizard. Those scattered wisps of fire that looked like the mane of a lion. Only one mana training scripture in the whole world could cause such a unique phenomenon. That was the Lionheart main family's white flame formula. The Black Wizard stammered, Might you be Sir Eugene Lionheart? He stopped trying to cast his spell. Instead he stepped backward, all the while sweating profusely, and laid down his staff. Eugene shook the blood off of his hand after getting up. Get out of the way, Eugene repeated. For a moment, the Black Wizard considered whether he should continue to resist or just submit. Neither choice would prevent this from turning into the worst-case scenario, so instead, the Black Wizard hid the murderous intent in his eyes, and he subtly shuffled over to the staff that he had laid down. And now hold on a moment. Allow me to explain the situation. The Black Wizard drew out his words, trying to buy even a few more seconds of precious time. However, Eugene had no intention of listening to his story. He had told the Black Wizard to get out of the way, but the Black Wizard hadn't. As such, Eugene was now decided on what to do next. Eugene narrowed the distance between them in an instant and reached out to grab the Black Wizard. Unfortunately for him, there was far too little time for the Black Wizard to properly cast a spell, so he recklessly burst out his mana. Although it wasn't as powerful or as effective as a proper spell, he was just trying to stop Eugene from getting any nearer by blindly expelling his mana. However, this still failed to cause Eugene any hindrance. Eugene just added sword light to his sword that was already covered by a blade of wind. The blast of mana could not stop Eugene's slash without any refinement. How insane, the Black Wizard cursed. How could he have imagined that his last-ditch effort could be cut through so easily? He couldn't believe that Eugene was currently only 17. I'm going to die. Or at least that's what the Black Wizard thought. Eugene's sword stopped right in front of the Black Wizard's throat. The Black Wizard trembled nervously, unable to gulp out of fear that this would cause his throat to be sliced open. Stay still, Eugene spat out this order as he walked past the Black Wizard. Yuid was still intoxicated from all the alcohol and drugs he had taken. However, Eugene didn't draw any closer to Yuid and instead slowly turned his gaze to the spot on the bed beside the disappointing heir. There laid a bowl containing a grotesquely jiggling mass of flesh. Could that be what I think it is? Eugene asked as he pointed to the mass of flesh. This wasn't just a simple chunk of meat. This was a cup used for certain ceremonies. Eugene promised, if it turns out that there's a human heart in that bowl, you can be sure that I will skin you alive and cut you to pieces, starting from your toes. Really isn't, the Black Wizard pleaded as he immediately knelt on the spot. That thing inside there really isn't a human heart. It's a monster's heart. What kind of monster? A unicorn's. Instead of listening any further, Eugene checked the inside of the bowl for himself. Indeed, he could see that the heart was too big to be a human's, and it also had a slightly bluish tint to it. Unicorns were monsters with such strong mana and divine power that they were called divine beasts. If it was meant to be used as its sacrifice, then a unicorn's heart was much more valuable than a human's. Is the other party a demon king? Eugene eventually asked. The Black Wizard reacted with shock. How dare? How could someone like myself arrange a contract with one of the demon kings? Then who is it? Eugene prompted. It's Baron Ulfr of Helmuth, the Black Wizard finally answered with his head bowed low. Eugene was unfamiliar with that name. His brow furrowed as he turned back to look at the Black Wizard. And just who is that bastard? Eugene asked. The Black Wizard explained. He is an incubus who serves under Duchess Giabella. Duchess Giabella? Are you talking about Noor Giabella? Yes, sir. Noor Giabella was the queen of the night demons. Eugene snorted and shook his head. It wasn't surprising that that damn succubus was still alive after 300 years. Although the Helmuth of the distant past was nothing more than a hell ruled by the 5 demon kings, with none of the trappings of a real nation, the current Helmuth was now a genuine country ruled over jointly by the demon kings of incarceration and destruction. Although it wasn't possible for her to stand on the same level as the demon kings, if it was the queen who ruled over all the night demons, it made sense for Noor Giabella to be called a duchess. Struggling to hold in his irritation, Eugene said, so what you're saying is, this damned bastard was about to sign a contract with a mere servant of Noor Giabella, an incubus who is nothing more than a baron. Is that what you're saying? Sir Eugene, the Black Wizard stammered, unsure what to say. So he was planning to offer up the heart of a unicorn while out of his mind on drugs and alcohol, in exchange for a contract with a mere incubus baron. Have I got all that right? It was Sir Ewad's own desire. The Black Wizard hastily made his excuses as he banged his head against the floor in apology. I was only listening to Sir Ewad's request. Sir Ewad was also the one who gave me the money to purchase the heart of a unicorn. I just listened to Sir Ewad's request, and I just couldn't refuse his order. Of course you couldn't refuse him, Eugene drawled sarcastically. After all, you must have been so excited. That idiot is still the eldest son of the Lionheart clan's direct line. On top of giving you money, he even wanted to make a contract with your master. If it had all worked out as planned, your strength would have increased greatly thanks to that fucking bastard named Ulfr. The Black Wizard stayed silent. No, on second thought it wouldn't just end with you getting stronger. If the deal had been struck, you might even have been able to negotiate a contract with that bitch Noir. This was why he had been so eager to arrange for Ewad to sign a contract with the enemy of Vermouth and the Lionheart clan. You were willing to arrange this contract because you were also greedy for the results. So don't push all the blame onto others and keep your mouth shut if you don't want me to beat you up, threatened Eugene. The Black Wizard was unable to come up with any more excuses. The killing intent that Eugene was exuding was far too ferocious and frightening for him to dare open his mouth anytime soon. Eugene turned his gaze away from the Black Wizard to look at Ewad, who was still lying on his back, eyes half open, and with drool dripping from his slack-jawed mouth. First of all, he needed to calm himself down. Eugene took a deep breath before taking another look at Ewad's face. This son of a bitch. In the end, he still couldn't contain his temper. Spitting out a vile curse, Eugene slapped Ewad on the cheek. Chapter 37. Slop. The bed bounced in its frame with a sound so terrible that it was hard to believe it came from just a slap. The heavy blow, which was loaded with all of Eugene's emotions, woke Ewad up from the haze of alcohol and drugs that had been clouding his mind. Arg. Ewad let out a scream. Although he had woken up, he still hadn't grasped the situation. After first clutching at his sore cheek, Ewad lifted his head, only for Eugene to push Ewad's hands aside. Have you come to your senses yet? Eugene asked as he slapped Yuid once more. Though rather than a slap, it would be more accurate to call it a full-on assault. The force of the blow even collapsed the legs of the bed, sending Yuid sprawling backward with his legs up in the air. Arg! Yuid screamed once again. Geez, big brother, Eugene sighed. He raised his hands to deliver another blow, but Yuid managed to react in time by covering his head with his arms. Yuid had only been slapped twice, but thick streams of tears were already dripping down his face. Considering that the insides of his cheeks had been torn, filling his mouth with blood, and his teeth had definitely been knocked loose, it was only natural that Yuid was in a great deal of pain. But for him to cry because of that? He wasn't just some 19-year-old man from any ordinary family. No, he was the eldest son of the Lionheart clan's direct line, a descendant of Vermouth. And he was crying just because he got slapped twice on the cheek? Yuid's tears did nothing to cool Eugene's rage. Instead, the sight of his whimpering only made his anger rise even higher. Do you really think you deserve any sympathy? Eugene sneered. Disoriented, Yuid babbled, Who are you? Why am I? Where is this? Are you playing dumb or do you really not know what's going on? The latter is definitely a possibility, considering that you took drugs while already drunk on alcohol. But having gone that far, it wouldn't be a surprise if you had difficulty recognizing your own parents. As Eugene said all this in a calm voice, he reached out with his hand. Yuid trembled and flinched backward. The sight of him then grabbing the blood-stained sheets and pulling them over his head was both absurd and pathetic. Eugene took a moment to calm himself before continuing, That's why I need you to come to your senses first. Now turn your other cheek towards me. Who on earth are you? Yuid repeated his question. Eugene sked in disapproval, You really are out of it. Do you still not recognize me? It can't be helped. It looks like I'll need to keep hitting you. If you haven't come to your senses yet, it just means you're not in enough pain. If I hit you a few more times, you'll have to come to your senses even if you don't want to. Yuid begged, Stop. Please don't hit me. First of all, get that blanket out of the way. Don't try to block it. If you pointlessly try to block it, I might just hit somewhere else by mistake and that'll be bad news for you. Although he said this, Eugene didn't wait for Yuid to move on his own accord. He pulled down the blanket and pushed away Yuid's hands covering his head. The side of Yuid's face that had been slapped twice was already swollen, and blood was dripping from his cracked lips. Eugene grabbed Yuid's nose and turned his head so that the other side was facing him. Bark. Ignoring Yuid's screams, Eugene slapped him twice on the remaining cheek so that the two sides appeared equal. Then he grabbed Yuid's head and held him in place with both hands. Eugene asked once more, Now have you come to your senses? Yuid could only sob in reply. Sorry, Eugene belatedly realized something. You might not be able to recognize me because I currently have my appearance tweaked a bit. Eugene immediately removed the transformation spell and returned to his original appearance. Yuid's eyes finally widened in recognition. His tear-filled eyes wavered, looking around desperately for help as he stammered, Hey big brother, Eugene casually greeted him. What are you doing here? I followed you here, big brother. In his heart he would much rather curse Yuid out, but for now Eugene decided to address Yuid as his big brother in a friendly tone. Just what were you thinking? He asked. Wah. Yuid mumbled uncomprehendingly. I'm asking you, just what on earth were you thinking, big brother? I mean, I really have tried to sympathize with your situation and I get that you're under a lot of stress, you know? Since your reality stinks like shit, I get that you might want to play around in the sweet depths of a succubus dream. I thought that it was pathetic and stupid of you, but it wasn't like I couldn't understand why you were doing it. And the life force that you were offering to the succubus belonged to you in the first place, right, big brother? So it's up to you to decide if you want to escape from reality by getting satisfaction from your dreams. However, this is just going too far. Grind. Eugene pressed down on Yuid's temples with both hands. The vice-like pressure caused Yuid's eyes to become red and bloodshot. He tried to twist himself free of Eugene's hands, but Eugene refused to let go of Yuid. You're not allowed to get involved with black magic, Eugene solemnly stated, keeping up the pressure. Yuid groaned, awe. As the eldest son of the Lionheart's direct line, the man next in line to become the patriarch, how could you try and make a contract with the demon folk? And with something like an incubus at that? I just couldn't help it. What do you mean you couldn't help it? You crazy bastard. Eugene suddenly roared. Do you even know what happens if you get into black magic with a contract instead of at least learning how to use it with the proper method? Your soul becomes the property of the demon folk. You become a slave who kills when told to kill and dies when told to die. There were two methods to start learning black magic. One method was to slowly learn how to control demonic power. However, it wasn't really a method that just anyone could pull off. Unless you were a truly exceptional wizard, you wouldn't be able to learn how to control demonic power all on your own. As such, most black wizards used the other method, which was to make a contract with a demon folk. Even if you were lacking in skill, you could still at least make a contract. And even if you couldn't control demonic power on their own, you could still receive demonic power from the demon folk you had contracted with. Most black wizards raised their strength using the demonic power they received from the demon folk they were contracted to. Thus, even with pitiful talents, they could quickly raise their levels. But no matter how strong they became, they could no longer escape their ties to the demon folk. Eugene unleashed a storm of questions. Do you really think that this is a problem that will affect only you? Do you truly understand what will happen if you become a black wizard? Let's see, the first thing to fall into the gutter because of you would probably be the family's honor. But that's only the start of it. What if the demon folk you contracted with told you to kill your mother? Then your father and finally your siblings. What would you do if he asked you to bring him the main family's white flame formula and all the treasures in the treasure vault? He said that I wouldn't need to show him unconditional obedience. You had protested with a disgruntled expression. He said that he would treat me with proper consideration. That he wouldn't give me any impossible or irrational orders. That's what he promised. Who promised that? Eugene sneered. Was it that fucking incubus bastard? You idiot, do you really think that the demon folk are like the dragons or the elves? To them, breaking a promise is as easy as a flick of the wrist. You had tried to argue, but our ancestor and the demon kings. That fucking oath was made with a demon king. Do you really think that a promise made with a small fry incubus will have the same power? With this cry, Eugene tightened the hold he had on Yuad's head instead of releasing it. You won't need to show him unconditional obedience? That's right, you won't need to. You can refuse to obey his orders, as long as you're prepared to die, that is. But do you really have the guts to do that? Could you really disobey him if it meant that you would die instead? Yuad couldn't say anything in his defense. Eugene sneered, as if you could do something like that. You're just a bastard who can't even defend yourself and instead escapes into alcohol and dreams. Why you? As tears fell from his eyes, Yuad's voice found some strength. What the hell gives you the right to judge me? Ha, fine then. With a snort, Eugene nodded his head in challenge. You think there's something wrong with what I just said? Then why don't you have a go at defending yourself, big brother? You have no idea. Ever since 4 years ago, everyone has been paying attention to you. Since you were adopted into the main family, Fath, the patriarch has been raining down support on you, so how could you? If someone else was listening to you, they might think you were being discriminated against. But you've also received a lot of support, haven't you, big brother? Weren't you also granted access to the ley line? And haven't you also inherited the white flame formula? Then, because you wanted to learn magic, they even sent you off to Arath, and you were even given a chance to become the disciple of a tower master. Am I wrong? I've been getting the same amount of support as you, big brother. I'm not this great because the patriarch favored me over you, but it's just because I was born this amazing. These words caused Yuad's shoulders to tremble in anger. Eugene continued, not only was I born with great talent, but I also put in just as much effort to become great. I bet I've worked a lot harder than you, right, big brother? Just because you're innately talented, it's impossible for me to compare to you. Yuad squeezed out these bitter words. So that's why you tried to get into black magic? Eugene asked. That's why you would sign a contract with an incubus, drag your family's name through the mud and give up everything you have? And just how far do you think you'd get by doing that? Eugene let go of Yuad's head. He lifted a finger to draw Yuad's attention and pointed to the black wizard kneeling on the floor beside them. Even if I fought a bastard like that with my eyes closed, I could still kill him within 10 seconds, Eugene confidently stated. Yuad bit his lip in silence. With the help of black magic, that's about as far as you could go. Did you really think that the strength you would get from signing a contract with an incubus would be all that amazing? All right. You might have been able to somehow use him as an intermediary so that you could sign a contract with the Queen of the Night Demons. Was that what you were hoping for, big brother? Yuet's cheeks trembled as he clenched his teeth. Bullseye. Eugene snorted and shook his head. All right, if you were able to sign a personal contract with Noir Giabella, you probably would have gotten pretty strong, Eugene admitted. But what would you do with all that strength? Do you really think that you'd be able to become the patriarch with the power of black magic? I never. Yuet's eyes twisted into a glare as he struggled to continue speaking. I never wanted to become the Lionheart clan's patriarch. Then what were you planning to do? I wanted to become a BL Black Wizard and go to Helmuth. In a place like that I'd be free, and my worth would be recognized. Ha, this son of a bitch. Eugene's face twisted into a grimace as he knocked Yuet on the head. Why would you want to receive the approval of demon folk? Which do you think is better, being recognized by your family or being recognized by the demon folk? And do you really think they would respect you? I think you've got something mixed up, big brother. Without your background as the eldest son of the main family, you really don't have any value to them. That's why, even more so, I want to get rid of that title. I never wanted to become the next patriarch, and I never asked to be born as the eldest son of the direct line. I want to be free to be able to do what I want to do. How greedy can you get? What? With your current background, aren't you already free to do as you please while receiving support for your goals as well? What more do you want? There's a lot of things I can't. Enough, I don't need to hear anymore. For now, just know this, big brother. I can't understand why you did this, and I don't want to understand. What is there to talk about with a bastard who thinks he's the only one who's got it unfair and challenging? A bastard who has had so many things granted to him from birth that others can only wish for, who makes up all sorts of excuses while whining about this and that, Eugene grumbled as he pulled away from Yuet. While you were in Aroth, drinking, doing drugs and getting lost in your dreams, Cyan and Seal, who stayed at the main estate, were truly giving it their best effort to improve themselves. Not to mention me. Yuet had run out of excuses. That's all there is to it. Eugene dismissed his excuses. There was no value in continuing the conversation. Eugene spun around like a whirlwind and kicked the back of the Black Wizard, who was still quietly kneeling down. The Black Wizard grunted. Ugh. Just stay still and don't come up with any nonsense, Eugene warned him. The Black Wizard protested. I wasn't doing anything. I know, said Eugene. But you probably were thinking of doing something stupid, right? The Black Wizard's body shook slightly. Was this monstrous brat even able to read other people's minds? But of course Eugene wasn't a mind reader. He had just given the guy a kick to relieve his own mounting irritation. Eugene didn't miss the fact that the Black Wizard had flinched. So you really were thinking of doing something stupid? Okay then, you were asking for this. He kicked the Black Wizard once more, sending him rolling across the floor with a cry of pain. Laws existed even in this chaotic street. While the guards in charge of this street might close their eyes to the usual commotions occurring because of corruption and the unwritten rules, the current uproar had gotten out of hand. Buildings along the center of the street were shaking, walls were collapsing, and other such chaos ensued. Even the guards killing time while enjoying the pleasures of the street couldn't ignore such an uproar. Sir Lionheart, the red-faced captain of the guards who had just arrived, mouthed these words. These 3 words kept flashing through the captain's wine-soaked head as he realized that things were fucked. Although it was common for incidents to occur on Bolero Street, this was the first time that such an influential figure had been involved. In the first place, such public figures rarely caused such a huge uproar, even if they did get involved with some incident. It was self-defense, Eugene said as he spread his arms, gesturing to his surroundings. My drunk older brother was half carried to this location, so I was just following him to check if he was being kidnapped. When I tried to go in after him, I was stopped, so I asked them what kind of place this was. But what was I supposed to do when they started threatening me and trying to steal my wallet? The captain played dumb. So to protect myself and my wallet, I fought with them. As for what happened inside, I think we've got a good idea of what you're trying to say. The guard captain interrupted Eugene with a desperate laugh, sweat pouring profusely down his face. We'll be sure to handle the cleanup, so if the good Sir Eugene could please leave this scene to us. Then I'll just leave and take my big brother with me. Along with that bastard, Eugene said, pointing to the Black Wizard. At this, the Black Wizard turned to look at the guard captain with a desperate look on his face. This was an unbearably embarrassing incident for the city. Drugs were supposedly forbidden in Arath. Although they might only pay lip service to this rule, turning a blind eye to its distribution and use of drugs. The fact that a drug den had been revealed in the middle of the street wasn't something that could be covered up by the unwritten rules. Moreover, both the Black Wizards and the Lionheart clan were caught up in this mess. If you just let them go like this, the guard captain's own head might be sent flying. The number of prominent figures who had ties to this street was too many to count, so if things went on as they were, even if the guard captain didn't have anything to do with all this, they might just cut off his head as part of a cover-up. Coming to a decision, the guard captain said, "That's my apologies, but I don't think we can allow you to do that. We'll perform our own interrogation on that Black Wizard." "Shut up," a cold voice descended from the sky. Eugene, who had been looking at the captain of the guards with a pitying gaze, lifted his head to look up into the sky. Lovelian was standing high up in the air. "How am I supposed to trust you to interrogate the suspect when you've been keeping your eyes shut to the things going on under your jurisdiction?" Lovelian demanded. "Head Wizard," the guard captain stammered. "I'll take care of this incident myself. If you have any complaints, you can call for the commander of the guards. Although I have to say, I don't believe that he will oppose me and be a stickler on this issue." Lovelian descended to the ground. The guard captain gave in and speechlessly bowed his head low. Though he wasn't the only one to do so. "Damn it, he got here so quickly," the Black Wizard thought as his face twisted into a terrible scowl. But there was no way that the news should have been able to reach the far-off Red Tower of Magic so quickly. He couldn't understand how the Tower Master, who held little interest in anything other than magic, could have arrived here so soon. "I'm sorry to have called you when you're already so busy," Eugene apologized. "It's fine," Lovelian replied as he took a calming breath. Eugene was the one who had summoned Lovelian. He had ordered the guide to do so through the communication terminal. Although he could have chosen to rely on the Lionheart name to purchase his way out, looking at the broader picture, he thought it would make for a neater ending if he got Lovelian's assistance rather than relying on his family's name. Eugene began to explain, "If you would like to know what happened." "I can roughly understand the situation," Lovelian said as he shook his head. "It's because of my negligence that such an unfortunate incident has occurred." Yuad's body trembled in fear. Lovelian sighed, "Playing around with succubi, forgetting the worries of reality through your dreams. Although I thought it was a much-needed method of relaxation, it appears that I made the wrong decision. My apologies, Eugene." "There's no need to apologize to me," Eugene attempted to wave it off. "No, I do need to apologize to you. Of course, I will be apologizing to Sir Gilead and Lady Tanis as well, but I'm also guilty for allowing you to witness such an ugly scene, Eugene. Furthermore, you performed the duties that I should have taken care of." Lovelian was also similar to Eugene in his disdain for Black Wizards. Just like his revered great master, the wise Sienna, her disciples also despised Black Wizards. Lovelian, in particular as Gilead's longtime friend, was well aware of just how absurd it was for a member of the Lionheart clan to get involved with black magic. Head Wizard, Yuad attempted to speak even as his body continued trembling. I didn't do it. I haven't started learning black magic." "But you tried to, didn't you?" Lovelian stared at Yuad with cold eyes. "Yuad, you have tarnished the name of the Lionheart clan. You have insulted Sir Gilead, who trusted you and left you to my care. Also, you have insulted Samuel, who chose to teach you, and you have insulted me, who chose to overlook all your foibles." Yuad stammered, "And no, I didn't intend to do any of that. I was just... If you continue to make any more excuses, I will just have to show you the cost of your insults immediately." "And I really am tempted to do so," Lovelian interrupted, unwilling to listen to Yuad's words. "So please don't say another word. If you want to continue making excuses, don't spout them to me. Tell them to Samuel, who taught you, Gilead, who sent you here, and Tanis." Yuad buried his head in his hands and burst into tears. Lovelian looked down at this sight with a pitying gaze before letting out a long sigh. "Let us return." With these words, Lovelian turned away from Yuad, and Eugene also didn't spare him another glance. Still at the center of everyone else's gazes, Yuad bowed his head to hide his face. As tears continued to wring themselves from his trembling frame, the light in Yuad's eyes flickered and died. The night air was cold. Chapter 38. 4 years ago, Yuad's eyes had sparkled brightly upon seeing the magic cast by Lovelian. He had held a pure passion and interest for magic. Born as the eldest son of the Lionheart clan's direct line with an excessive amount of expectations placed on him, Yuad had held a much greater interest in reading books and learning magic than he had in learning how to swing a sword and move his body. However, just because he was interested in it didn't mean he had a talent for it. This was actually pretty common. Most people unfortunately didn't have a lot of talent for the things they really liked and wanted to do. But Yuad had felt betrayed by this. To the same extent that he had once felt love and hope for learning magic, Yuad felt frustrated by how different his reality was from his ideal. Yuad's suffering wasn't particularly cruel or uncommon. It was something that had happened to a lot of people. Although Yuad held a great passion and interest in magic, even going so far as to harbor love for it, magic didn't return Yuad's affections. Gilead hadn't waited for dawn, though it was already late at night. A few minutes past midnight, Gilead arrived at the capital of Arath. Then he immediately headed to the Red Tower of Magic. And Gilead wasn't the only one to come to the Red Tower of Magic at this midnight hour. On the top floor of the Red Tower of Magic, along with Lovelian and Eugene, a man wearing a pair of black-framed glasses was waiting in his seat. "It's nice to meet you," the man greeted them politely. His name was Balzac Ludbeth. He was a powerful black wizard who had been occupying the seat of Black Tower Master for the past few decades. He got up from his chair and bowed his head deeply to Gilead. "My name is Balzac Ludbeth," he introduced himself. "I am Gilead Lionheart." Gilead reluctantly returned the greeting. Glaring at Balzac, Gilead gave the man a slight bow of the head, then exchanged a short glance with Eugene. Tanis, who had accompanied Gilead, absolutely refused to bow her head to the man. Biting on her bottom lip, she glared at both Eugene and Balzac. "What are you doing here?" she demanded harshly. Tanis couldn't contain her surging emotions. Yuad was her only son, the one who was meant to become the next patriarch of the main family. But because he was more interested in magic than martial arts, she had reluctantly released him from her watchful eye so he could go and cultivate himself. But her beloved son had actually attempted to learn black magic. Tanis absolutely refused to accept such a terrible reality. "Please calm yourself," Lovelian requested in a gloomy voice. "This incident has nothing to do with the Black Tower Master." "What kind of nonsense is that?" Tanis cried out. "Didn't you say that Yuad was tempted into dabbling with black magic? But are you really going to look me in the eye and expect me to believe that the Black Tower Master had nothing to do with it? The Black Tower of Magic does not hold authority over all the black wizards in Arath." As he sat back down, Balzac continued to speak. "As for the black wizard responsible for this unfortunate affair, although we now know that his name is Gavid, he is not a member of the Black Tower of Magic. He is only a member of the Wizards Guild." The Wizards Guild was known as the largest community of wizards in the world. However, it didn't have as much prestige as it had scale. Unlike the guild, which allowed anyone to join as long as they could use magic, the Towers of Magic were far more exclusive and would only accept those with genuinely exceptional skills. Although strictly speaking I might also be a member of the Wizards Guild, that does not make me consider Gavid to even merit being an associate. Wouldn't you agree that that is the case? While pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose, he gave Lovelian a glance. "For example, while we both might be wizards belonging to the guild, I'm afraid that the Red Tower Master and I don't consider ourselves as part of the same fraternity." Though he remained silent, Lovelian nodded in agreement. Still furious, Tanis attempted to continue speaking, but Gilead raised his hand to prevent her from doing so. "But you still haven't explained why you're here," Gilead pointed out in a cold voice. If he claimed that the Black Tower of Magic wasn't involved in this incident, why had Balzac insisted on being here? Gilead's concealed rage made the air in the room grow cold. However, Balzac wasn't overwhelmed by Gilead's hostility and instead calmly admitted, "The reason I'm here is to take responsibility for this matter." As the patriarch of the Lionheart clan's main family, Gilead was one of a handful of the strongest people on the continent. But so was Balzac. Decades ago he had originally been in line to become the next Tower Master of the Blue Tower of Magic. Now he was one of only 3 legendary black wizards to have signed a personal contract with the Demon King of Incarceration. Balzac continued, "Although Gavid isn't a member of the Black Tower of Magic as the Black Tower Master, I intend to take responsibility for the problems that Gavid has caused." "Responsibility," Gilead questioned. Yes, for tempting Uid into learning black magic and arranging such a contract, Balzac confirmed. Strictly speaking, these cannot be considered crimes. Hundreds of years ago, just learning black magic would cause one to be sentenced as a criminal and executed. However, after the treaty agreed upon between the Great Vermouth and the Demon Kings was signed, learning black magic had become a personal right. Balzac elaborated, though that might be the case. I hope to show proper regard to the Lionheart clan's stance on this matter. I don't really like the sound of your words, Gilead spat out. It sounds like you're saying that for the sake of the Lionheart clan's prestige, you're willing to bow your head in apology even though you don't really need to. Have I got that right? Yes, Balzac immediately responded without any attempt at denying it. But Gilead's knuckles clenched. His killing intent ratcheted up a level, causing space itself to tremble. As Eugene assessed the killing intent in the air, he glanced down at the goosebumps being raised on his forearms. He had felt such levels of killing intent countless times in his past life. But the body he had been reincarnated into, which had only ever experienced this life, was trembling in the face of the killing intent. It isn't something I strictly need to take responsibility for, and I hope you understand that. A ghastly wave of killing intent had engulfed Balzac. Still, even in the midst of this, his face remained calm as he continued. However, I wish to take responsibility anyway as a fellow black wizard. Because I have no desire to lose the current amicable peace that we have maintained with the Lionheart clan because of this incident. If that's how you really feel, how about getting down on your knees? Tanis demanded in a sharp tone. Balzac immediately got up from his seat and without any hesitation said, if that's what you desire. As Balzac was about to kneel down, Gilead shook his head violently and shouted, stop, there's no need for that. Reluctantly, Gilead continued, I will gratefully accept your offer of non-obligatory responsibility. But there is one thing that concerns me. I fear that you may be attempting to cover up this incident in the name of taking responsibility. Crimes involving drugs are governed by the law of Arath. Everyone caught in the drug den will be confined in Arath's prison, leaving me unable to conceal anything. Balzac paused for a moment to give Gilead a look. Unless you would like to behead them yourself? Such words seem like an insult to my honor, Gilead growled. All I ask is that the laws of Arath be applied fairly. By what right should I, as a foreigner, attempt to pass judgment over the laws of Arath? I've done you a discourtesy, Balzac said as an apology. Gilead changed the subject. What will happen to the succubi? The business they're operating isn't illegal. Even the hallucinogens they make use of in their store aren't considered drugs. But there will be sanctions placed on them for allowing mistreatment of their patrons. Then how exactly are you supposed to be taking responsibility? Tanis hissed. As Balzac sat down once more, he replied, I have arranged for the incubus with whom Gavid is currently contracted and who attempted to sign a contract with Sir Uid to be beheaded. I beg your pardon? Baron Owen Ulfer, an incubus who serves under Duke Giabella. As Duke Giabella was not involved in this scheme, she cannot claim any responsibility for it, but the one who was directly involved with Gavid, Baron Ulfer, will lose his head. Balzac raised his hand. At this movement, Gilead leaned his body slightly closer to Tanis. This was to protect her should something unexpected occur. Although Gilead's actions and attitude blatantly showed his caution and distrust of Balzac, Balzac did not feel offended by this. With a completely serene expression, he just drew his finger down through the air. Whoosh! A black burst of flame ignited in midair and a scroll appeared. After waiting for the fire to die down, Balzac took the scroll and declared, The Demon King of Incarceration has sent a personal message. Eugene took firm hold of his body that was about to react unconsciously. He held back his rage. Nothing good would happen from pointlessly showing a reaction in this situation. His mind began to race in the place of his frozen body. The Demon King of Incarceration was one of Helmuth's 2 remaining Demon Kings. In his past life, Eugene hadn't been able to storm into the Demon King of Incarceration's castle. The Demon King of Incarceration would like to convey his immense disappointment over causing such distress to the family of his good friend Vermouth. Balzac read out. His good friend Vermouth. These words caused Eugene's stomach to turn. He wanted to immediately jump up from his seat and grab Balzac by the collar. He wanted to snap at the man to go and tell that Demon King he served to stop spouting such bullshit and just keep his trap shut. Eugene wasn't the only one whose expression twisted at these words. Gilead also began glaring at Balzac while biting down on his lips. Even as he ignored these looks, Balzac continued speaking. As such, he declares that he will personally behead Owen Alfer, and if desired he can have the head delivered directly to the Lionheart clan. There's no need for that. Gilead ground out these words with a grimace. If that's the case, I will inform him that just beheading the Baron will be sufficient, Balzac said as he stood up once more. Once again allow me to bow my head in apology to you. While this arrangement may not be enough to appease your anger, Lord Patriarch, please know that neither the Demon King of Incarceration nor the Black Tower of Magic have any desire to offend the Lionheart clan. Gilead stayed grimly silent. Well then, I look forward to meeting you again under more pleasurable circumstances. With this farewell, Balzac made to leave. Before he exited the room, he shot a glance at Eugene. Eugene felt this gaze, but he didn't immediately return Balzac's look. There was a short silence. I will take Eud back with me to the main estate when I return. Gilead was the first to speak. As he rubbed his stiff cheeks, he let out a long sigh and said, Master Lovelian, I'm afraid that I've made a grave error. All of this is my fault. Not at all. If I had only been more strict with Eud, something like this wouldn't have happened, Lovelian confessed with a similarly long sigh. He shook his head from side to side before bowing his head towards Tanis. My sincere apologies. Eud, what is that child doing now? Tanis asked, her eyes overflowing with resentment. She truly believed that Lovelian was at fault for Eud's error. If he had only accepted Eud as his disciple and had taught Eud with a wholehearted zeal, then there was no way that her son would have gone out and done something like this. Eud didn't have enough talent to be his disciple? What did that even mean? There was no way her son Eud could be lacking in any form. I told him to rest in his room, Lovelian replied. Gilead, after glaring at Lovelian, Tanis turned to her husband. We don't really need to take Eud back home with us, do we? Eud isn't. He hasn't truly dabbled in black magic. He just made an attempt, that's all. Gilead remained stonily silent. Tanis pleaded, since he knows that he's made a mistake, he won't do something like that again. If we treat this as a lesson, then he might even work harder from now on. So can't we just... Tanis couldn't help but feel desperate. Cyan and Seal were waiting for them at the main estate. While Eud was off in Aroth, Cyan and Seal were busy winning the approval of the members of the main family. It was impossible for the eldest son, who had returned after causing a scandal, to obtain the main family members' approval at this point. That was why Eud had been sent to Aroth in the first place. Since he couldn't receive any recognition by staying at the main estate, Tanis had wanted him to win the approval of others in Aroth. She had hoped that by becoming the disciple of the Red Tower Master and interacting with other outstanding wizards, he would be able to form bonds and obtain power that wouldn't be available to him at the main estate. She needed for Eud to somehow remain in Aroth. If he were to become Lovelian's disciple, he could use the Archwizard's support to further develop himself. This scandal would also become just a trivial matter to be overlooked. Tanis attempted to persuade Gilead, if he has the right conditions, Eud can do better. He has the talent for it. You know that too, right, dear? Eud has always been fond of books and magic ever since he was young. Enough, Gilead was tired of listening to such talk. He was well aware of how Eud had spent his days in Aroth. The results of Eud's 4 years here were futile and worthless. Although he had been granted every convenience and received plenty of support, Eud's magical abilities hadn't surpassed the third circle. Considering that he had been trained in controlling mana ever since he was young, this was an appalling level of skill. He could barely even be called a third circle wizard. In terms of both his understanding and his skills in magic, he was actually much worse than that. In a pained voice, Gilead remarked, in over 300 years of the Lionheart clan's history, there has never been a single member of the main family who became a black wizard. It's just a folly of youth. Tanis's eyes wavered as she feebly tried to convince herself and others. Instead of answering immediately, Gilead exchanged looks with Eugene. I'm sorry, Eugene. Could I ask you to step outside for a minute? Yes, sir. Eugene was just as reluctant to keep listening to such a difficult conversation. As Eugene got up, Tanis turned to glare at him. I told you to get along with Eud. Even though I asked to take care of your big brother. Tanis. Gilead's eyes snapped open to glare at Tanis. Eugene has done nothing wrong. So why are you taking this out on him? Tanis argued. That brat could have just stopped Uid. But instead of taking care of the issue before then, he just quietly waited and allowed things to get to. Don't say another word. Gilead suddenly roared. Although Eugene, who had been standing there patiently, wondered whether or not he should say something to Tanis, in the end he didn't dare to do so and just bowed his head. I'll take my leave now, Eugene said as he turned to leave. Staying here just to act as the target of Tanis' hatred would be an exhausting affair. After Eugene had left, Tanis glared at the closed door and took a deep breath. I may have made an improper remark, Tanis admitted. But Gilead, please reconsider. I will not change my decision. Even though Uid is my son, what that child has done has tarnished the clan's name. I cannot possibly allow the boy to remain in Arath, Gilead stated. But what place is left for our child at the main estate? Tanis no longer begged her husband and instead vented all her feelings of resentment and frustration at him. You've done nothing to secure Uid's position. Instead, you've only listened to every demand of that damned Ancilla and her children, as well as that adopted child who doesn't even share a single drop of blood with you. Do you really believe that? Gilead asked quietly, losing his anger. He looked at Tanis with disappointed eyes and said, I have given my children everything they have asked for. I sent Uid to Arath because he wanted to learn magic. If that really was for Uid's sake. Tanis leaped out of her seat with this loud outburst. As she gasped for breath, she alternately glared at Lovelian and Gilead. Then you should have made sure that Uid became Lovelian's disciple no matter what. And if you were truly worried about Uid going wrong, you should have sent someone to monitor and control that child. Please just stop. Gilead let out a long sigh and dropped his face into his hands. Monitor and control? Wasn't it because Uid had hated such restrictions that he had left the main estate and gone to Arath in the first place? Gilead had placed his trust in his eldest son. Since Uid had been constantly monitored and burdened with expectations all his life, Gilead had believed that once he got to Arath, he would be able to enjoy a better life, living by himself. The rumors about Uid getting close to succubi and demon folk, Gilead had already been aware of them. But if that was all there was to it, Gilead could still allow it. However, black magic and drugs were going too far. Please don't bring any more shame onto the Lionheart clan, and to myself, Gilead pleaded. Tanis shrieked, shame? Don't be ridiculous. If he returns to the main estate like this, I'll be the one who can't bear the shame of it all. I would much rather die than see that happen. Gilead attempted to persuade her. I don't believe that remaining in Arath will be good for Uid either. If he still has any desire left to learn magic, then at the main estate we can. If you're determined to take Uid back with you, then I will take Uid back to my family's estate. Tanis refused to give in. If they returned to the main estate like this, all of her plans would be messed up. Uid would be pushed out of his position by the twins and Tanis by Ancilla, turning them into a pair of figureheads. I will definitely never allow Uid to remain trapped at the main estate. I would rather have him stay at my family's home, where he can learn magic without fear of being oppressed, Tanis said, her words showing utter sincerity. Tanis had no desire to receive Ancilla's ridicule, and there was still time to decide who the next patriarch would be. As such, no matter how, Uid needed to develop enough strength to solidify his bid for the position. If he just returned to the main family like this, it would be impossible for him to turn the tables on his siblings. If that's what you desire, Gilead sighed as he closed his eyes. He couldn't decide which course of action was correct, so he gave in. As long as Uid agrees, you may do as you please. That was the only thing he could say. Sir Eugene Lionheart. Balzac greeted Eugene from where he was standing on the other side of the corridor. Although the man had left the room first, he hadn't departed immediately and had instead chosen to wait for Eugene. Under the circumstances, we weren't able to speak comfortably despite this being our first meeting, Balzac observed. Eugene bluntly replied, I have no desire to have a comfortable conversation with you, Tower Master. Instead of bowing his head in greeting, Eugene tilted his head away at an angle as a way to overtly show his displeasure. Seeing this reaction, Balzac just grinned. It looks like you don't like me very much, Balzac pointed out. It's not just the Black Tower Master I dislike. I despise all black wizards, Eugene admitted. Is that so? I can understand why. Although 300 years may have passed, the public's perception of black magic still isn't very pleasant. As he said this, Balzac shrugged. As a black wizard myself, I can't help but feel that it's unfortunate. Although it might seem unreliable coming from my own lips, I haven't done anything wrong. Eugene countered, even if the Black Tower Master himself hasn't done anything wrong, aren't there a lot of black wizards going around doing evil deeds? This was an undeniable fact. Unfortunately, there were still a lot of black wizards freely wandering the world, violating the ban on human experimentation. Though the laws of Aroth and the Black Tower of Magic severely enforced this ban, there were plenty of places for black wizards to escape from these strict laws in this wide world. But the black wizards aren't the only ones, are they? Balzac pointed out as he bared his teeth in a smile. People like wizards can easily sacrifice something like morals for the sake of satisfying their own curiosity and desire. Or, to put it in simple terms, there are many times more aberrant wizards than there are aberrant black wizards. Well, you might be right about that, but... Eugene hesitantly agreed. Isn't Ued one such example? He is just a wizard, not a black wizard. He was only trying to use black magic as a means to achieve his own ends. Although it might not have worked out, this affair with Ued didn't begin because of black magic, but because of his own desires. What exactly is it that you want to hear from me? Eugene asked impatiently. I just hope that you'll agree to not transfer your dislike of black magic onto me. With a chuckle, Balzac walked over to Eugene and offered his hand. I've heard a lot about you, Sir Eugene. Your performance in the Bloodline Continuation Ceremony has been famous for several years now. And I've also heard that recently you've shown a few great accomplishments in magic as well. Eugene frowned. I don't think I've done anything that can be considered a great accomplishment. Didn't you get the Red Tower Master to write you a letter of recommendation for Akron? Balzac raised a brow. That alone must mean your achievements were great enough to deserve such recognition, Sir Eugene. Eugene refused to take Balzac's extended hand. While casually lowering his hand back down, Balzac stared at Eugene. He then changed the subject. Although I wasn't able to tell you this inside the room, part of the responsibility that I've decided to take for this incident also involves you, Sir Eugene. What do you mean by that? Eugene asked cautiously. It will be difficult for you to qualify for admission into Akron with just a letter of recommendation from the Red Tower Master. Because unfortunately for you, Sir Eugene, the other Tower Masters and wizards involved in making the decision will reject you on the grounds that you lack the necessary qualifications. So what? Are you saying that you will write me a letter of recommendation as well, Head Wizard Balzac? I hold a great interest in your talent, Eugene. And well, that's not the only factor. Balzac glanced at the closed door before continuing to speak. Another factor is that I don't have the best of relationships with Head Wizard Lovelian. While I don't hold any bad feelings towards him, the Red Tower Master dislikes me just because I am a black wizard. On top of that, I feel like I may receive the Lionheart clan's enmity because of this incident. So because of that, you're saying that you'll write me a letter of recommendation? Yes. Honestly speaking, even if I do write you a letter of recommendation that supports Head Wizard Lovelian's proposal, well, I don't expect that alone will be enough to make you like me, but won't it at least reduce your dislike of me? It will also show my sincerity to get along with the Lionheart clan. If you are offering to write one for me, I will gladly accept your help, Eugene replied with a frown. Although he disliked black wizards, that didn't mean he believed that his dislike should extend to the gifts that they offered. But even if I do, I can't promise to be friends with you, Head Wizard Balzac, Eugene warned. As long as you don't dislike me as much as you do now, that will be enough. With a broad smile, Balzac stepped back, allowing Eugene to leave. That's all that I wanted to say. My apologies for keeping you here. Did you really have nothing to do with my older brother's issue? As he passed Balzac, Eugene decided to openly ask this question. At these words, Balzac burst into laughter. I take great pride in being a black wizard, he said, the eyes hidden behind his glasses sparking. The existence of an incompetent black wizard is just a disgrace to black magic. Even if he is the eldest son of the Lionheart family, as long as he doesn't possess astounding talent, I would never consider offering him a chance to join us. Is that enough to answer your question? Yes, it is. Eugene clicked his tongue as he recalled the sight of Ued trembling as tears poured down his face. Pathetic bastard.